Our World Cup preview continues, and it is time for the United States of America. Yeah! Last time we made the World Cup was 8 years ago. The United States is back in Group B and is the Pot 2 team. We already reviewed England and every team from Group A, told you everything you needed to know about all of them. If you want to watch those videos, this is a playlist, and you can find them very easily, I promise. If you can't, that playlist will be linked at the end of this video. The United States qualification was incredibly nervous because 4 years ago, well, basically 5 years ago, the United States lost away to Trinidad and Tobago, and a couple of other results went against them all on the final day to conspire to knock the United States out of World Cup qualifying. So this World Cup cycle was supposed to start fabulously. It actually didn't. The United States started away with a draw at El Salvador, who hadn't been in the final round of World Cup qualifying in CONCACAF for a long time. After that, the United States drew Canada, and everybody, including me, was officially freaking out. We also went 1-0 behind to Honduras before scoring 4 goals and essentially righting the ship. The U.S. kept the momentum going, won at home against Mexico, drew that match away, and despite losing away to Canada and to Costa Rica on the final day of qualifying, had a good enough goal difference so that they could go through easily at the end. By easily, I quite literally mean on goal difference, but the goal difference was rather insurmountable on that road trip to Costa Rica, so we needed to lose like 8-0, so we were fine. We weren't. I was incredibly nervous the entire time. But out of the 8 teams, because of the pandemic adjusted qualification schedule, the United States finished in the top 3, guaranteeing automatic qualification. For the United States, it is a return to what had been a glorious run. History lesson. So you might not know this. The United States had actually made 6 consecutive World Cups before failing to qualify. Before that, the United States has made a World Cup for 40 years. So this is the first time the U.S. is qualifying after missing since 1990. But if you go back even farther, the U.S. actually has an incredibly rich history in the World Cup, because in the first World Cup in Uruguay, the United States finished 3rd, lost to Argentina in the semifinal 6-1, but in the first ever World Cup, the U.S. achieved the best finish by a team not from Europe and South America ever. That is still true. No team from Africa, North and Central America, or Asia, or Oceania has ever had a better finish than the United States in 1930. Soccer. And if you want more recent success, the United States qualified for the knockouts 2002, 2010, and 2014, only missing out on the knockouts in 2006. The 2014 qualification was particularly impressive because it included a group with Germany and Portugal. Cristiano Ronaldo was unable to make the knockouts of the 2014 World Cup because of the United States. And I'm telling you all of that now because what I want you to understand is, having watched this team a lot, this is the best United States team that has ever existed, probably since 1930. If we look at the continental competitions the United States plays in, which is the duopoly between Mexico and the United States, the U.S. owns the Nations League and the Gold Cup, the 2 continental competitions, having beaten Mexico in the final of both. It took extra time both times to do it, but Mexico actually hasn't beaten the United States in a long time. The United States has achieved a clear first position in its continent for the first time in my living memory. Mexico is in a clear second position, and that's because the U.S. has great players all over Europe. But chief among them is my official player to watch for the U.S. going into the World Cup, and it's Gio Reyna. You might have expected Christian Pulisic. He won a Champions League, lit up Real Madrid in the Champions League semifinal at Chelsea, and even though he's in and out of the team, he's the talisman. But he's a known quantity. He brings it. He wears all of the responsibility in the captain's armband. Gio Reyna is the X factor. Reyna is the child of 2 former U.S. national team players. Not 1, 2. He has immense physical gifts, and he also has such a high technical ceiling. He unleashed a run at the Azteca against Mexico that is the single best run I have ever seen an American player make with the ball at their feet. He made about 8 guys miss. I fell out of my chair. He has been struggling with injuries for much of the last year at Dortmund, but he is versatile and capable of beating anyone. So if he gets fit, he can play anywhere across essentially the front 5 positions in a 4-3-3 and make a serious impact. If he has a huge tournament, the United States actually could beat anyone. But he doesn't have to do it alone. The U.S. has a strong, sturdy 4-3-3 if we look at what their projected formation is going into the World Cup. The way we can expect them to line up is what we see at the Azteca, the match away to Mexico for the United States in World Cup qualifying. And you see a 4-3-3 that features a midfield of Yunus Musa, Tyler Adams, and he was hurt at the time, but Weston McKennie will fill the 3rd spot. That is a world-class midfield. And the wing spots are very comfortable too, because behind Pulisic and Reina, there's Timothy Weah, who's fantastic in France and has been amazing and direct for the U.S. national team, and Brendan Aronson, who's been a revelation at Leeds. But the issues for the United States are right up the spine: striker, center back, and goalkeeper. An MLS pairing of Walker Zimmerman and Miles Robinson was the preferred center back group, but Miles Robinson tore his Achilles, so all of that is up in the air in the preparation for the World Cup. Zach Steffen and Matt Turner are battling for the starting goalkeeper spot, and no striker seems to be able to distinguish themselves at all. If the U.S. fails, it's because their center backs get beat and their strikers can't score. Which, now that I say it out loud, doesn't sound promising. We're not supposed to win anyways. The coach, Greg Berhalter, has been married to this 4-3-3 throughout all of the competitive matches that he has played. And even though he's achieved all of these great things with this team, the United States seems to want more. I don't really like Greg Berhalter. I think he's a bit out of his depth, but he does prepare his team to play in a way that controls the game. They control the game by defending. You just look at the semifinal and the final of the Gold Cup. The U.S. won 1-0 and 1-0. Against Mexico for 180 minutes, the U.S. didn't concede a goal. And I think this is actually the U.S. biggest strength going into the World Cup, playing teams that are better than it, particularly England. Because the final part of these videos is where we break down the opportunity, the chance to get out of the group stage, and the chance to actually win the whole tournament. Now, Christian Pulisic has said they're going there with the intention to win the whole thing. I love to be optimistic. I think the U.S. have a snowball's chance in hell of actually winning the World Cup. But I do think the U.S. could surprise some people and maybe get all the way to a quarterfinal. I predict the U.S. is going to finish second in its group. And if you go back to 2010, this doesn't seem that far-fetched. The U.S. actually finished above England. They were in the same group. Because the United States is so used to playing like it's the worst team against freaking Panama, then the United States can show up against England and execute the exact same game plan that it's normally been doing and at least frustrate a more talented England team. What can derail that, though? A lack of goal scoring from the center forward position and a general lack of fitness in the whole team. Christian Pulisic is not alone in being an injury-prone American player. Gio Reyna missed most of the last year. I already mentioned one of our center backs is down and out for the count, and Anthony Robinson, the every-time starting left back for the U.S. national team, has serious ankle issues. Weston McKennie seems to have a broken foot every other week, and the United States just can't ever be healthy at the same time. If a couple of those guys are missing, the U.S. is very quickly into a trough of lower European League talent or MLS talent. The U.S. is fully capable of playing a couple of 1-0s and actually winning this group, but it's just as capable of not scoring for 2 or even 3 matches of this World Cup because of the just horrid production at the center forward position. Pulisic was hurt for half of qualifying, and he led the team with 5 goals during World Cup qualification. So did the United States get out of the group as the Pot 2 team? Yes. I think the United States can handle Wales and Iran. I do think both of those teams are good. I think Wales and the U.S. are actually very similar. And then you match up against the best team from Group A, and the United States has proven that it can frustrate teams like that and just needs a magic moment from players that it didn't used to have in the past. No offense to Clint Dempsey, who's still my favorite player of all time. But Christian Pulisic and Gio Reyna are players that can create something out of nothing, and they'll need to. The United States is going to make any more impression in the round of 16. But I'm just very happy they're back at the World Cup. This 4-3-3 and Greg Berhalter and his fabulous Jordans will be showing up in Qatar.
What are those?
They are my crock.
And we'll see what happens. Now, here's the playlist if you missed all the other previews of all the other teams so that you can brag to your friends about how much you know about all the teams at the World Cup. It's very cool. I'm helping you win debates about who's going to win in the World Cup. That's why I'm here.